Today, I'm going to be discussing Kali Linux tools with the use of BobCTF. Now, I've always been interested in CTFs at Kali Linux because these are tools that are very cool in a sense. Like they're tools that hackers actually use when they want to get into something. Now, before we begin, let's discuss what is capture the flag. Now, capture the flag literally is you have two teams and they're trying to take a flag from each other. This concept can be seen in the virtual world because a flag in that case would be something that can't be accessed easily, something say either hidden or is password protected. Now in cybersecurity, there are two types of capture the flags. You have red team, blue team events, and red team events. Now the former is similar to a real life game when you have hackers breaking into others' defenses, while the latter is more attacker based because there is no defense. So your purpose is to see how many flags you can capture. Now, BobCTF is like a red team event because you're trying to find a flag in a known vulnerable machine. And since it's vulnerable, it's essentially has a lack of a strong defense. Now, in this case, BobCTF actually comes from VulnHub, and I recommend you use VulnHub to find other vulnerable machines because they supply a lot of machines that you could test other vulnerabilities and exploits. Now, before we actually get into hacking, let's discuss some topics that are very important to know before you start. All right, so the first thing that you will do in this on BobCTF is you want to use the command net discover. That's because when you start a CTF, you have to do something called host discovery. You have to discover what machine you are attacking, and you can do this through the command net discover. You could also use nmap, but we're actually going to use that right after net discover because nmap is slightly more complicated and it's not needed when initially just discover the host. Now, when you run net discover, you're going to have a bunch of IP addresses show up, and you're going to have to be able to find out which one the vulnerable machine is. To do this, nmap comes in handy. Essentially, if you run an nmap command on each IP address from net discover, you essentially get a more detailed report of each IP address. Specifically, mainly for CTS, what you want to look at is you want to see which ports are open. In doing so, you can start to develop an idea of what you have to exploit. Now, for BobCTF, port 80 is open, which essentially means that that IP address has its own web server. While this port is commonly open because in a CTF, a web server is something that is very helpful to people who are attempting to get into it. Other CTFs will likely also have other ports open, like say 21, which is FTP, or 22, which is SSH. Now, it's the same idea of port 80, but essentially, if 21 or 22 are open, what you have to do probably is you'd have to find a way to get into the SSH server through some tactic. And something else that nmap is also very important in is that you will know port 80 is open because it will also show you the web pages the specific web pages which are accessible. Now, what happens next is remote code execution. Now, this sounds all fancy, but it's really simple. Well, it is exactly as the words remote code execution say. In BobCTF specifically, you're going to have a website for you to enter commands in. And obviously, this makes it really easy because then you could force the website to respond to any command you do and thus exploits it. Hence why this vulnerability is often patched because it becomes real easy for someone to inject malicious code, and in doing so, they can gain access to private information that the website does not want you to access. Now, specifically, we're going to take advantage of what's called a reverse shell. What you have to do is you have to create a listener on Netcat, which would be in your Kali Linux terminal, And when you do this, you now have to go to that website that allows you to insert this malicious code, and you insert your bash shell into the website. And because of this, your listener, which is set on a specific port, and your bash shell, which is also going to be given information on a specific port, the listener will be able to detect the bash shell, and then you're now granted access to the files. Now, it's also preferred that you create a TTY shell after this, because the bash shell itself, or the reverse shell itself, is not very UI friendly. It's not very user friendly. And when you spawn a TTY shell, it essentially turns your bash shell into a fully functional terminal. And now the next important thing we're going to look at, or the last major concept, at least of this CTF, is that of encryption and decryption. Now, in CTFs, there's often a point where you have to decrypt something, well, whether that be like you have a file that you can't read, or a string of random characters, which is actually encrypted, so it looks like it's random characters, but it isn't. Now, for this CTF, what you have is a .gpg file that cannot be opened. Now, with a simple Google search, you can tell that a GPG file is just some type of encryption. And the way to decrypt this file is that you have to find a passphrase that would allow you to unlock it. So that's how a GPG file works. However, there's also other decrypting, such as password decrypting. You might have to use a tool like maybe Medusa or Jack the Ripper, and these tools essentially will just brute force with thousands of passwords until a match is found. What's cool is Kali Linux actually provides rocku.txt. Essentially, when you download this text file, it contains I believe roughly thousands of the most commonly used passwords, and this run in with a tool like Medusa, although it may take a while, you're going to be able to crack the password in the end. Now, you can decrypt like a GPT file by guessing the encryption. Say you could run a script, and then maybe you'll get the key, maybe you'll get the word. However, this itself is not very efficient, because brute forcing is never efficient. To actually decrypt this GPT file, you actually just have to pay very close attention to the files in BobCTF. In doing so, you might wander upon the encryption key without even knowing it. Now, something I want to say is that a CTF is often very time consuming. That is, it's not as easy as it may look. Like obviously for this CTF, you have to create a shell, you have to download some files, you have to go you have to change directories a couple times, and then boom, you're in. You have root access. However, when you're first attempting one of these capture the flags, it may actually be very time consuming, because you might not be familiar with some of these tools, or you might just not think of it off the top of your head. It'll take a lot of practice to know which tools to use, and sometimes it takes a little luck too. Sometimes if you pick the right tool, like you pick the right exploit, and it gets you somewhere, then luckily you got in. Now, I hope this presentation has helped you be better informed about what you're getting yourself into, and that there's a lot going on in BobCTF, but if you take it one step at a time, you can easily hack into it. Furthermore, you can apply these skills to other capture the flags, or even in the real world, being in the cybersecurity field. Now, it's your turn to download BobCTF off of VulnHub and attempt the CTF. You can read my report, which is pretty much step by step of what you need to do if you're unable to figure out how to proceed if you're stuck somewhere. Also, if my report is not helpful, there are also other reports out there of other people and their take on how to do it. However, I believe that my report should be sufficient enough for you to get through without much difficulties. Thank you.